of engagement. And I say that because we've been this adaptive evolutionary, part of this adaptive evolutionary process for a long time. And all along at different stages we've developed tools and we've been able to innovate our lives and our beings. And we're in a unique place where technology is accelerated and we're able to now engage ourselves on levels that were never available before. And so we can do this. Why is it necessary? Because you need to do this because the medical system is not really doing this at the moment. They're still in that reactionary, reductionistic, whenever something happens, we're gonna treat that and knock that down. So it's up to you to take control of this process. The first day of medical school, I learned the most important lesson that I was going to learn in medical school, in my opinion, when the dean stood in front of us and he said, you're gonna go through 4 years of education and residency, and it's gonna be really tough. But I want to tell you something. 50% of everything you're going to learn is going to be incorrect, and the other 50% is going to be incomplete. So that was my last day of medical school. So I decided that I needed to take their guidance, but also really get involved with this process myself. Also, your situation's unique, so if you really want somebody to command your personal systems biology, you can align yourself with the best medical team in the world, but if you're not a participatory person in this and in taking ownership of it, you're going to get less than ideal results. So what is systems biology? Systems biology, its focus is on complex interactions, and so it's a gigantic topic, and it's very new, and we're starting to put that together since the ideology has been reductionism. Now we're integrating things back up. So my advice is understand concepts and keep that in mind so that when you come up against details, especially in the age of blogging and information where everything is so hyper-focused, get the concepts down, and so then those details make a lot more sense to you. So we're going to kind of jump into this. So when you're looking at systems biology, you have to look at the biological matrix. You know, we are this continuous, seamless entity that's operating everything from the genes all the way up to how you operate your physical body within the environment. And they're all interconnected. It's seamless. There's internal environments. There's external environments. There's layers of impact that we're looking at. The cell is a hologram of the entire body. And so you're building up on this side. The heart is a great example of this. The heart has more nervous and skeletal muscle tissue than it does muscular tissue. It has its own nervous system. It produces over 40 hormones in response to what's happening and what's needed. So there's a hologram going on. I think Dr. McCready is going to bring the heart to life a little bit later today. You already did? All right, well, yes, great. So I hope to second that. What I would encourage you is that, we get fascinated with the biology. Don't forget about the environment, like your human microbiome. Looking at what bacteria in the gut has a huge impact in a lot of signaling and messaging that's going on between the bacterium and to you. And then like even with food production, how the environment of your food is going to turn on genes within that food to produce proteins that you're going to consume as well. So there's all kinds of layers of intelligence that need to be factored into this process. So let's just take a quick example of the systems biology of energy production, because energy production is, absolutely necessary for life. We need energy to run life and run our bodies. Mitochondria are the power plants of that process. They produce the currency, ATP. Mitochondrial dysfunction, energy production decline, is implicated in almost every chronic disease. If you look at the published medical literature, it had 500 papers on it a few years ago, and there's 3,000 papers on it that were released in 2012. So if you can understand some systems biology of just producing energy, you're in a good place. So we're going to look at a few different enzymes and hormone signals that can impact that. So here you have your healthy hormone levels, and they're definitely going to turn on PGC1 alpha, the protein that turns on mitochondrial biogenesis. Your food and your fueling system, if you're going to use free fatty acids, that's a less efficient fuel, so that's going to have the body compensate by having more power plants ready to go. Caloric restriction, turning on sirtuins. ATP and AMP and mTOR and Krebs is really about what you do, your exercise pattern, your exertional patterns. And it happens to be the most impactful, at least that we know of at this point, of turning on PGC1 alpha, turning on mitochondria, increasing your energy production. And so there's a critical ratio of available fuel to spent fuel rods, ATP to AMP, of 10 to 1. And so it's a big case for high-intense interval training. So even if it's short bursts, really depress that ratio, really turn on PGC1 alpha. So if you're going to look at your biological systems and start to interact with it, you have to analyze it. I encourage you to try to analyze this on as many levels as you can so that you're getting different perspectives. VO2 max is one of the most telling markers of your chance of dying of all causes. So one metabolic equivalent, you know, if you're resting at one metabolic equivalent, and me, because I'm in front of you talking, I'm at 5, if you can increase your metabolic capacity by one metabolic equivalent, you get your own personal relative risk reduction of dying of a heart-related cause of 15%. You get an overall all-mortality relative risk reduction of 13%. So if you can measure, my aerobic capacity is 10 mets, and through your training you can then measure that you're at 15 mets of aerobic capacity, well, there goes 75% relative risk reduction of heart disease, or of your risk of dying of heart disease. So I want to kind of just jump into the biomarkers, into the panel, and as Dave said, I work for WellnessFX in addition to my private practice, and we look at biomarkers. Why are biomarkers good to look at? Because we can't see them. So when we measure this, you can get a tremendous amount of data that otherwise wasn't available to us. We can't know, and it's operating on a different time scale. So, for instance, if you go through puberty or a growth spurt, your human growth hormone, your IGF-1, can go up about 3-fold higher than what's normally available. You don't notice that immediately. You grow over the course of a year. You can't see that. So when you're looking and measuring at the biomarkers, you're able to see basic processes and where they're headed way before they manifest physically, and so you can get on top of it, you can get out ahead of it. It's complex, obviously. There's pitfalls to it because it's a snapshot. And I tell my clients, if you know, you take just a miserable person and you give them the right joke and they spontaneously laugh even for 5 seconds, you snap that photo, they look like a happy person. So you can't get married to just a snapshot. And it's very important for you to take everything into the context. What do these biomarkers look like when I'm at my best health? What do they look like when I'm not so well? Am I gaining weight? Am I losing weight? Cholesterol, for instance. If I talk to people who come in and they, when I started working out, I'm getting into better shape, I'm getting stronger, and my cholesterol just went to pot. And I said, great, that means that you're building tissue. And if you look at the medical literature, if your LDL cholesterol goes up, or if you blunt that process, you will blunt the anabolic response, and you won't build as much tissue as you could otherwise. So everything's situational. I'm going to look at 3 quick examples, depending upon what my time is. So methylation. Methylation is a marker of your metabolic efficiency. It's a spent fuel rod of methionine that donates a basic carbon unit of life, carbon to hydrogens, and it's part of metabolism. Whether you're breaking things down in catabolism, whether you're building things up in anabolism, methylation has to happen. So since we're talking about optimizing, I brought some panels of athletes that we looked at through WellnessFX. This is a high-level athlete. They weren't feeling well. They were struggling. A lot of the struggle was mental, emotional. They were down, depressed, agitated, irritated. They were like a sick, vulnerable animal. So we looked at different systems biology. We uncovered that their homocysteine level was extraordinarily high. I wanted at 8 or less. typically. Medical community wanted at 12 or less. This was at 24. So we also took it a step further, and we looked at some critical B vitamin saturation points. B12, B9, folic acid are methylators. And her B12 was pretty low. Folic acid was okay. However, we went down to the gene level of the systems biology, and we looked at her MTHFR, which activates folic acid, and we found that she had one gene that was inefficient. So even this mid-level folic acid she was maybe vulnerable at that level. So we treated her, and then she immediately felt better. We didn't have to immediately do the lab panel again because she experienced improvement. And then we repeated it 6 months later. Her B12 levels are up, her homocysteine's down, her performance is up, folate's up. So if you want to jump into the hormone physiology, so we looked at Wellness FX, we looked at 2 other athletes, one swimmer who competed at London about a month before the games, and then an elite CrossFitter who competed at the CrossFit Games a month later. And we said, okay, what does their hormone physiology look like? What is it telling us? Of note, they're about the same percent body fat, 8 and 9. This Olympic swimmer is long and lean, 6 foot, 163. This guy is a short, torquey power man that's 47 pounds more muscle mass, right? Essentially. It's not like that, there's a percentage gain. So when you look at their hormone levels, this guy has 50% more testosterone. He has 100% almost, or roughly, more DHEA, a mild anabolic that the adrenal gland will secrete if it's not under too much duress and needing to deal with catabolic and cortisol and stress management. And so you get a picture of there. It's not a complete picture. Sometimes in overtraining, sex hormone binding globulin goes up. So this is what we actually essentially thought, that although this powerful CrossFitter was a month away from competition, we think that he was overdoing it. And when we say overdoing it, that doesn't necessarily mean he was overtraining physically in the gym. His recovery systems may not have been adequate. It may have been too much psychological stress. It may have been poor sleep. And that's what we kind of get to dig into when we assess the systems biology. Last one, fuel efficiency. I see this all the time because my private practice is in Marin, and there's a tremendous amount of ultramarathoners and cyclists and triathletes. And so if you just look at the medical model of what's your fasting blood sugar, they both look very good at 80 and 79. But when you look at the hemoglobin A1C, which is kind of a 2 to 3 month, it's a byproduct of sugar that saturates the red blood cells, and it gives us a surrogate marker of your average blood sugar levels. A vastly different picture emerges where this person, who is a real carbaholic fueler, so to speak, has a really high hemoglobin A1C, and if you go all the way back to your systems biology of the PGC1 alpha turning on the mitochondria, glucose, since it's such a fast, efficient fuel, it can turn off the amount and the robustness, the efficiency of the mitochondria because the body is super efficient. Just like Steve said, if you supplement with things, you tend to turn down your own natural production, and you get negative feedback. So you have to be very intelligent about when you use things. That doesn't mean I'm against carbohydrates. I actually think that it's a performance enhancement drug when used properly. So you can get a sense of how their fuel system is and what their fuel efficiency is by looking at things like hemoglobin A1C in that context. So, in summary, we'll range by some augmentation, taking some thyroid, but always ask the questions of why is that down in the first part, and keep looking